You know how many countries are watching to see if China and the US will go to war? The answer is every single one. From the developed nations in Europe and America to the rapidly growing ones in Asia, basically the entire world is keeping an eye on China, and the US. Some countries hope the two will go to war, so they can profit from the chaos. Others are praying they don't, afraid they'll get dragged into the mess. Over the past decade, China's rise has been astonishing, while America, the old superpower, has shown signs of decline. Everyone can see it. China's economy has been booming, its military power growing fast, and its overall strength climbing year after year. And that makes America nervous, seeing China's economy take off. The US felt threatened and wanted to slow China down. So in 2019, Washington launched the trade war, raising tariffs on Chinese goods. The plan was simple: hit China's economy hard enough to stunt its growth, and that would also weaken China's military development. But things didn't go as planned. China held its ground. The economy didn't crash, it kept growing. When the trade war didn't work, the US turned to the tech war, targeting Chinese tech companies, blocking high-tech exports to China, and even detaining Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou. Yet again, the result backfired. The more pressure China faced, the faster its tech sector advanced. The tech war failed to stop China's rise. It actually pushed China to develop even stronger homegrown technologies. So now, some say the US has only one card left to play: war. But here's the thing: China is the world's second largest economy, and the US is number one. If these two superpowers ever went to war, the entire planet would feel the shockwaves. Take Asia, for example. The first to get hit would be Japan and South Korea. Both host US military bases. So if a China-US war ever breaks out, those bases would likely be destroyed right away. That's why, in recent years, both Japan and South Korea have been so active in fueling the Russia-Ukraine conflict, sending supplies, weapons, drones, even food to Ukraine. Japan's own food supply isn't great, but they still ship rations to Ukraine. South Korea sent massive amounts of ammunition, something like 330,000 shells of 155mm rounds. Believe it or not, South Korea is now one of Ukraine's major arms suppliers. Why would two Asian countries care so much about the European war? Simple: to keep America's attention focused on Europe, not Asia. The longer the war in Ukraine drags on, the less likely it is for the US to start trouble in the Pacific. And they have good reason to worry. Look at the Philippines, constantly stirring up trouble in the South China Sea. Do you really think they dare do that with that US backing? Washington's been trying to turn the Philippines into the next Ukraine, a proxy to challenge China. Every time you hear about the Philippines accidentally trespassing on Chinese islands or reefs, that's not an accident. If a real conflict breaks out, the US would jump in right away with military support. But China wouldn't waste time fighting a proxy. It would aim straight for the US itself. America knows this too. That's why it doesn't really want to get directly involved. With the Russia-Ukraine war still draining resources, the US can't afford to open a second front in Asia. Japan and South Korea understand that. They want peace in Asia, but Europe actually wants China and the US to go to war. Why? Because then Europe could finally escape the economic pressure it's been under since the Russia-Ukraine conflict began. Let's be honest, America is the biggest winner of that war. Before the conflict, Europe imported cheap oil and gas from Russia. Now it has to buy expensive energy from the US, often at triple the price. American energy companies are raking in huge profits. For example, one fully loaded US LNG tanker costs around $60 million, but Europe buys it for $275 million. That's a crazy markup. Meanwhile, Europe keeps sending weapons to Ukraine and paying sky-high energy prices to America. It's losing on both ends. So yeah, many in Europe secretly hope the focus shifts to Asia. If China and the US start fighting, Europe might finally get some breathing room. And Russia would love nothing more than to see China and the US clash. The Russia-Ukraine war has dragged on for 3 years now. and Russia's economy is under pressure. If a new global crisis breaks out in Asia, the US will have no time or energy to keep helping Ukraine. Without US support, Ukraine wouldn't last long. If China and the US go to war, Europe and Russia would both quietly celebrate. Europe could negotiate an end to the Ukraine war and start buying cheap Russian gas again, while Russia could stabilize its economy. Meanwhile, countries like Japan and South Korea will do anything to keep the war far away from home, which is why they keep sending aid and weapons to Ukraine. As long as the US is busy in Europe, Asia stays relatively safe. But not everyone thinks that way. The Philippines, for example, actually wants tension. They've got the US behind them, so they keep pushing the limits, occupying reefs, sending ships to China's islands, trying to provoke something bigger. They know they can't take on China by themselves, so they're trying to drag the US into the fight. If China and the US clash in the South China Sea, the Philippines hopes to grab some benefits from the chaos. China sees through this, of course. That's why it's been patient. If it ever has to fight, it'll make sure the US gets pulled in too. Destroy the US fleet, and America's naval dominance would be over. But America's no fool. It doesn't want to step directly into a war it can't win. It's trying to use the Philippines as a proxy, just like Ukraine. So now, China, the US, and the Philippines are all playing their own games, carefully balancing their moves. As long as that balance holds, the situation will stay the way it is, tense, but not explosive.